my friend Ryan's 21st birthday. I threw him a surprise party at my house. I invited all of our friends in our group, plus some acquaintances and friends of friends who were brought along. My parents weren't home for the night, so it worked out nicely. The peak of the night was when Ryan walked in the door and all of us got to scream surprise. It was a Friday night, so mostly everyone drank a decent amount. I tried not to get too drunk, just so I could stay alert in case anyone was doing something dumb in my parents' house. We had cake and other desserts set up for Ryan too. I did a lot of walking around offering cake and beers to everyone, even people I'd never met before, including one guy with long blonde hair and a football shirt sitting on my couch, and some dude who looked a few years older sitting on my grandma's old rocking chair that she gave to my mom. I whispered into Ryan's ear at some point that half these random dudes that our friends brought over looked either kind of creepy or odd. He agreed with me, a bit over-enthusiastically, but that's probably because he was a lot drunker than I was. The night progressed and everyone got drunker, and everyone was doing increasingly silly and dumb things. The guy who was still in the rocking chair started to hum a song really loudly and obnoxiously. The rest of us just watched and found it hilarious for some reason. Then the guy with the long blonde hair started to sing a completely different song, and everyone else kind of just joined along. It was a room full of drunk 20-something-year-olds singing very loudly. It was a fun time, but eventually it had to end, and people started leaving one by one as they sobered up. A couple of people stayed the night because they were too drunk to drive, including Ryan and our friend Sean. I slept in the living room with them. We left the TV on, with the movie The Hangover on in the background. I suddenly thought to ask the two, who were those two guys who had been in the living room on the couch and in the rocking chair most of the night? Sean said the guy with the long blonde hair was a friend of one of our other friends, but as far as the guy in the rocking chair, neither of them had a clue. I decided to text everyone in the group chat we had made prior to the surprise party to find out who was friends with this creepy dude in the rocking chair. One by one, our friends said they had no idea. It seemed everyone assumed he knew someone there, but apparently that wasn't the case. I was waiting on two more friends to answer, but I was pretty sure one of them had to have known him. Anyway, Sean and Ryan fell asleep quickly, so I decided to go to sleep too. I woke up an hour later though, I guess to the sound of the TV. I checked my phone, which was sitting on my chest. There were a bunch of texts from the group chat. To put it short, every single person in the group chat said they had no idea who that was. I sat up to let that sink in better. Some random, creepy-looking older dude snuck into my house and hid in plain sight for hours. I suddenly looked around the living room, lit up by the glow of the TV. I felt as if my entire house was unsafe and that we weren't alone. I quietly stepped out from the living room towards the kitchen. I went over to the tiny hall that separates the kitchen from the 3 bedrooms on the first floor, still using the glow from the TV in the living room as my light source to navigate. I think because I didn't want to draw attention, I guess. I stepped into the hall and froze. I was pretty sure I could see something at the end of the hall. It was too dark though. I took a couple steps forward, and it became more clear that there was a person standing there at the end of the hall. Then to make it even worse, I heard a faint, low, cackling kind of laugh at the far end of the hall. I slowly backed away without acting fazed at all. Meanwhile, I felt like my heart dropped to my stomach. I got back to the living room and shook my 2 friends awake. I whispered to them that someone was in the house with us. I got on the phone with the police and talked as low as I could into the phone so that the woman on the other end could still hear me. And as I was on the phone, I saw the creepy guy from earlier, the guy who was on the rocking chair all night, suddenly walk out to the living room, look at us sitting there, passed us, and walked out the front door. I was literally frozen. I think my friends were too. I told the 911 operator that the intruder just left my house. She said lock all the doors and we should be fine. A cop came by for a few minutes just to check in. After he left, my friends and I found a trail of blood stains on the carpet in the hallway. The stains led to the end of the hall, where I saw him standing. Then it just stopped. Needless to say, no sleep was had that night. I'm sure we all have those memories from our childhood that make us uncomfortable to think about. How we were so young and innocent and unknowing to something bad that was about to happen. I was in the first grade. It was either a Friday or Saturday night. All I know is we didn't have school the next day. My friend's mom set up a little party for his birthday at a local bowling alley. All his friends and their parents were there, and we were sectioned off into different lanes to play with different groups. I wasn't having a lot of fun, mainly because I stunk at bowling, and still do to this day. I remember complaining and crying to my mom that I didn't want to play anymore, and I think one of the kids started taking my turn for me. There was a back room sectioned off for the party with a bunch of snacks, sweets, and sodas. So while my mom was talking to some of the other parents, I think that's when I snuck to that back room to fill my stomach with cupcakes and other sweets. There was a door leading to the outside in this room. It led to the back of the building, I guess. And the next thing I remember was the moment a man was standing at the doorway telling me to come outside and check something out. To this day, it still makes me cringe, thinking back and remembering that I actually listened to the random man and went out there. Upon stepping outside, the man knelt down to my level so that we were face to face. Then he pointed at a truck that was running maybe 5 yards away. I remember he said he had the rest of the sweets and snacks in the back of his truck, and he needed help unloading it. He also offered to give me a $20 reward if I helped him. Now, I'm sure in my 6-year-old mindset, I was thinking about how cool I'd look, and how jealous all the other kids would be. I followed the man to his truck. He opened the back door for me, and pointed at a big black plastic bag sitting in his back seat. I climbed into the truck, and the next thing I remember was the horrific, ear-piercing scream of a woman. It was my mom, standing at the back doorway of the bowling alley, screaming my name over and over. I ran to my mom, who grabbed me and held me tight as I heard the sound of tires skidding out, followed by a truck speeding away. I turned to look, and the truck was already gone. My mom was in tears, scolding me. A few other parents and kids came out, and it turned into a huge scene. It was a traumatizingly embarrassing experience for me. The bowling alley had to shut operations for the night, and the party had to be cut short. I've asked my mom about this story so many times. She said the police arrived after my dad picked me up, and my mom told the police everything I told her. She also got a decent look at the man and his truck, so she gave a description to the police as well. Unfortunately, nothing was ever heard as far as the police catching him. All I have to say is, if any of you are parents, burn the phrase "don't talk to strangers" into your kids' heads. For my son's 12th birthday, my wife and I threw him a little party in the backyard. We invited the whole family, as we usually did for any of our kids' birthdays, and let him invite all of his friends too. We live in rural New Jersey, so our backyard connects to forest on 2 sides. We also have a pretty big property, which allowed us to space out a bunch of tables on the grass with food and refreshments. The little party went into the night. Most of our guests left, but closer family and some of our friends stayed late. It was probably 8 o'clock. The mosquitoes were out in full force, so I decided to run over to the shed at the far end of the backyard by the woods to fetch the tiki torches. I grabbed like 6 torches and set them on the grass while I went back in to look for fuel. However, while I was in the shed, I heard steps in the woods. I stopped what I was doing to take a look out there, but honestly, it was just too dark to see out into the woods. After finding the fuel, I went back to the part of the yard everyone else was at and pitched the torches into the ground. The 6 torches gave off a decent amount of light while keeping us safe from the blood-sucking pests. There were about 6 kids left, including my son, and they all wanted to play hide-and-seek in the woods. My wife and I allowed it, just making sure to tell them to stay close to the tree line. My son and his friends went to play their little game in the woods, which left the rest of us to sit in peace for a little bit. It was a solid 15 minutes of talking with relatives and hearing the kids laughing and yelling in the near distance out in the woods. But all of a sudden, the yelling turned to screams, concerning-sounding screams from the kids. All of us looked at each other, sitting up in concern. The kids one by one came running out of the woods, yelling that there's something in there. We don't have bears or any big predatory animals around here, so that was not the first thing we assumed it to be. I told all the kids to stay near the patio area. My brother Dom and I, being the biggest men there, decided to go investigate. We took a couple flashlights and off we went into the pitch black woods. The only sounds we heard around us were crickets and other night bugs. So we went deeper, and that's when we started to hear something else. It sounded like an animal at first, but as we followed the sound to get closer, the sound started to become more human-like. We continued to walk, and we agreed we both had the feeling that we were being watched, like stalked. I put my arm out to stop Dom. Standing in the silence now, the best way I could describe the sound we were hearing was a moaning, angry kind of sound. It sounded human, but it was a bizarre sound. Then, a few cracks of the leaves on the ground ahead of us. We aimed our lights over there, and there was someone or something behind the tree. The moaning sound stopped. Dom stepped forward and called out. What happened next was textbook horror movie stuff. A scream, so loud, so blood-curdling, so inhuman, filled the air. I'm sure it could be heard for miles. Dom and I turned and booked it back to the property. We waved at everyone to go inside and we made it back. Dom got on the phone with the sheriff's department. They said it was probably a wild animal. We wanted to insist it was a human, but we honestly couldn't. We to this day don't know who or what we saw and heard in those woods, but it was definitely stalking us and the kids when they were playing hide and seek. And that scream we heard, it just didn't sound human to us.
Creativity is not something I wait for. I am Antoni Sendra, a filmmaker. I'm always hunting and hustling.
After breaking up with my first girlfriend when I was 21, I had been single for about a year. It was the first time I had been single in years, so it took some getting used to again. Eventually, I decided it was time to get back into the dating scene, so I started downloading a bunch of dating apps. One of the apps I downloaded was OkCupid, which was the one I used the most. I vibed the most with one girl I matched with named Brenna. Based on her interests and biography, she was into a lot of things I was into. She was a very pretty, light-skinned black girl. We had talked for a while and agreed that I would pick her up at her place to go out and get food. I pulled up to her house on the west side of town at 6:30. It was about 10 minutes after sunset, so it was really getting dark. I texted Brenna, and she took a while to answer. I sat in my car actually staring at the conversation for a while, waiting for the texting bubble to come up. When it finally did, she responded saying, "Hey, sorry about that. My brother's gonna meet you outside. He's being really annoying and protective." I showed her how upset I was and how much I didn't want to have to meet her brother, but she just kept saying, "Sorry, he's forcing me." I saw the front door of the house I was parked in front of open, and a guy came out walking over to the driveway while looking at my car. I got out to go over and meet him, realizing he towered over me. Another thing I quickly noted was his skin was significantly more dark than Brenna's, to the point that they wouldn't even seem related at all. He shook my hand and introduced himself as Will. There didn't seem to be anything off-putting about him at first glance, and he seemed friendly enough. He started going on about how he just wanted to make sure a trustworthy, stand-up guy was about to take out his sister. We talked for a little, and he seemed normal enough, I guess. He finally asked me to come inside to meet Brenna. He led me into the house and shut the door behind me. He told me to wait right there in the living room while he went upstairs to get Brenna. As he went upstairs, I looked into the living room to realize there were two men sitting on the couch, both giving me a certain kind of look I just didn't like. I said what's up to them. One of them just slightly nodded his head, but just barely. Will from upstairs called down that he's trying to find Brenna, which was odd. I turned to look at the room adjacent to the living room, which was the dining room. To my surprise, there was another man sitting at the dining room table, also staring at me. Instinctively, I stepped back and reached for the doorknob without even turning my back to the three men. One of them screamed, "Grab him," as they saw me reach for the door. At that point, I flung the door open and ran to my car. They weren't far behind. In fact, I made it into my car with only maybe a second to spare before they were outside my doors, kicking and hitting my windows, trying to break them. I was able to drive away down the block, but keep in mind this was on a public residential road. I have no idea how it didn't cause more of a scene out on the street. I made it home to tell my mom and dad what happened, still out of breath. They were in shock and almost didn't believe it, and they recommended I call the police. I did. I reported the house and the incident to the police. One of the neighbors vouched for my story anonymously because they saw the group attacking my car when I escaped. Police arrested 3 of the 4 men I saw in the house, one of them being Will, or whatever his real name was. The other guy couldn't be found or identified. I didn't stop using dating apps after that. I was just a lot more cautious from there on. At the time of this story, I had already met a total of 3 people on Match.com. It didn't really work out with 2 of them, and the third one I dated for 4 months. After my breakup, I wanted to take a break from commitment and just find something more casual. And so I matched with a girl named Kylie, who I got along with decently well on the app. She seemed down to just come over to my apartment and hang out for the night. She showed up about half an hour later and seemed really quiet in person. We hung out in my room in the upstairs of my apartment for most of the night. We just talked for a while watching TV in the background. There were a bunch of awkward silences, but I did my best to fill them with new conversations. In the back of my mind the whole time I was thinking, are we gonna kiss? Does she expect me to move in for the kiss? How do I go about it? But hours of talking later, I started to realize there was something wrong with this girl. She became increasingly more emotionless. She was staring off across the room as she'd talk slowly, talking about increasingly deep and dark things. Then she said something surprising. She thanked me for allowing her to sleep over. Apparently, when I said she could come hang out for the night, she meant to literally stay the night. She got off the bed and asked what blankets she could use for the floor. I grabbed a couple blankets and pillows and made a sort of bed for her on the floor. She thanked me and then laid down on her side, facing away from me. I guessed she was ready to go to sleep. I turned off the TV and closed my eyes. We didn't say a single word to each other, and I have to admit it was very awkward. I fell asleep probably half an hour after shutting the TV, but I awoke randomly in the middle of the night. I sat up and looked down at the floor and was able to see that Kylie didn't appear to be laying on the floor anymore. I flipped on the lamp and looked around the room. She wasn't anywhere, actually. But just then, I heard a voice downstairs. It sounded like it could be Kylie. All the walls in my apartment are paper thin, so noise travels quite easily throughout it. I quietly left my room and stood at the foot of the top of the stairs, listening for what Kylie could be saying. All the lights upstairs were off, but she was talking in a low voice. I just couldn't tell for sure what exactly she was saying. I figured she was on the phone with someone, but still, I went downstairs to check. I stepped into the dark kitchen, and there she was. But she wasn't on the phone. She was just creepily sitting in one of the chairs facing the wall. She seemed to still be muttering to herself. I was frozen. All I could say was, "Kylie?" She turned her head to me slowly, looked at me for a few seconds, then turned back to face the wall. I went upstairs quickly to my room and crawled into my bed to call my dad. I had to call at least 3 times before he finally picked up, obviously sounding concerned. I told him in a quiet panic that some random girl from online was staying the night, and now she was sitting in my kitchen muttering to herself like a crazy person. He sounded confused as hell, but told me to call 911 if she seemed like she was having some kind of episode to safely get her out of there. Then I looked up and noticed a figure standing by my bedroom door in the dark. It was Kylie. All I saw was the outline of her skinny body. She stood there for maybe 10 seconds, All I heard was my dad on the other end of the phone saying hello over and over. The next thing I saw was the silhouette of Kylie at my door suddenly charge at me in my bed as she began to scream. She lunged at me and put her hands around my throat, trying to choke me. However, I was able to quickly overpower her and hold her down against the bed. I screamed at my dad to call the cops. I was able to drag the insane girl downstairs by the time the cops came. The cops took her away to fill out a few documents. I think it's safe to say that you should always meet people from websites and apps in a safe, public place first. I've been single most of my life. However, I've used apps like Tinder or Badoo just for fun for a long time. Have I met some weird people? Yes. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened in February of 2014. Dead of winter, the time of year that these apps are perhaps most useful if you're just looking for casual fun when you can't have fun outside. I was using the app Badoo, and at any given moment I would be messaging at least 5 different girls, only because I'd know 9 out of 10 conversations would end up dying. One conversation kept going strong, however. The girl's name was Maria. Every time I'd hear that triple note ding and notification from Badoo saying, "Maria sent you a new message," I'd actually get a little excited. I asked if she was down to hang out tonight. She wrote back yeah and asked for my address. I gave it to her without hesitation. She said she'd be right back. I said, "Wait, give me your number so we could text." But she didn't respond. After a few minutes, it said she was offline. The app did that when someone wasn't active for a few minutes. So I figured be back soon, and I patiently waited while going back to watching TV. I kept routinely checking the app to see if she came back online, but she stayed offline. An hour passed, and now it was getting a bit late for her to even come over. Plus, I was getting kind of tired, so the idea was kind of shot. I went to bed. The next morning, I woke up early. It was raining outside, and it was still a little dark. I checked the clock, and it was 6:30 in the morning. I was grateful it wasn't like 11 and I could get back to sleep. I did, however, pick up my phone to check for any new text and junk. I saw a few notifications from Badoo, actually. Maria had messaged me a few times. I opened the app as I rubbed my eyes. She said, "Hey, I'm coming now," at like 3 a.m. Then, at like 3:20 a.m., it said, "I'm here." At 4 a.m., it said, "I'm watching you." I noticed it said she was online too, and then the triple tone sound beeped, meaning I got a new message from her. It said, "How did you sleep?" My heart started to race, and I felt a feeling of unease in my chest and in my head. I right away looked out the window to see if anyone was hiding in the bushes outside. Then I shut the blind. I typed back, "Who the hell is this?" 10 seconds later, I got the disturbing message, "Check your closet and find out." I looked across my room, to the closet door that I know was closed last night. The closet door that was now cracked open. I was so shook I almost couldn't breathe. Then, the door pushed open ever so slowly, revealing the dark inside of the closet. I started screaming for my dad. I had to run past the closet to leave my room, but as I got to my dad's room to find the bed empty, I had completely forgotten he wasn't home for the weekend. My older brother was home though, and he came rushing to see what the commotion was, to which I told him to check the closet with me. When we checked the closet, there wasn't a single trace of anyone having been in there. Then a cold breeze hit me, and I realized my stupid self didn't lock my window the night before. Things made a little more sense now. I went to the police station to show the messages on the app in hopes they could track the person, but apparently it wasn't that easy. I would need court orders and such in order for Badoo to be required to release the information of the user. I refrained from doing anything. However, luckily after a long week of sleeping in fear, nothing happened, and I was able to move on with my life. This was an eye-catching post made in 2014, though it was eye-catching for the wrong reasons. The advertiser states that he's seeking an unpaid young houseboy that will care for him, but he had to note that he meant in a non-sexual way. He also notes that he's a 55-year-old male who lives alone with his cat, but even if that isn't slightly concerning considering he's seeking younger males to live with him, he claims to have had 3 houseboys before. This could leave one to wonder whatever became of them. What you're about to hear is the scariest thing I'd ever experienced. My sister and her husband were going away to Hawaii for a week. So since I'm the second oldest, she asked me to watch my 2-year-old nephew Sean for the duration. 2 was a tricky age for me because Sean was still in diapers at the time, and changing diapers was the last thing I'd ever want to be doing. Still, family is family, and I had to return a favor to them anyway. I was sleeping in the guest bedroom upstairs for the duration, and by the 3rd day I had everything down to a rhythm. Wake up, feed him, do my work in the living room while supervising him as he played, feeding him again, then putting him to bed. My sister has a high-tech baby monitor that connects to a touchscreen tablet. It records sound and video from above Sean's crib and feeds it to the tablet. I would keep that by my side while he slept, no matter where I was. The living room, the bedroom, anywhere. Midday most of the time he'd get sleepy and I'd bring him to his crib to take a nap. By like the 4th day, Sean was taking a nap, so I was in the backyard sitting at my sister's outdoor bar on my laptop. I had the baby monitor placed on the bar, so I was able to easily hear Sean start to laugh at something. I checked the tablet, and I saw him standing in his crib, so I guessed it was time to take him out. I went up to his room and grabbed him to bring him outside in the yard with me, where he drove around in his little electric toy car. For basically the rest of the day, I just watched Sean play with his toys while I would either be doing work on my laptop or just watching something on TV. Shortly after dinner time, I changed him one last time and put him into his crib. An hour or so passed, and there really wasn't much else for me to do. I wasn't interested in anything playing on TV, so I went upstairs to the guest bedroom to put an end to the night. Laying in bed in the dark, the room suddenly lit up from the tablet on the bedside table. I heard Sean laughing again. The tablet would light up if any significant amount of motion or sound was detected. I was comfortable in my position. I didn't really want to move. But when the screen suddenly went dark, yet I could still hear Sean's laughs, I got confused. I picked up the tablet, and all I saw was black. Yet, in a way, it seemed as though the screen was still on. I heard Sean say the word "yeah" as he continued laughing. Something wasn't right. I set the tablet down and began walking to Sean's room, calling his name as I was on my way. I got to his room, and he was standing in his crib. I asked him why he was awake and who he was talking to. He then tried reaching for something atop the crib, but his short arms couldn't reach it. It seemed he was going for the camera for the baby monitor. So I pointed at it and said, "Camera?" And he replied, "Yeah." I picked him up to give him a little lift to see what he was trying to do with the camera. And as I lifted him, he used his little thumb to cover the camera lens. My heart sank as I put the pieces together. The reason the tablet went dark was because it was being covered by someone, but I knew it wasn't Sean based on the fact that he couldn't reach it. "Sean, is someone in here?" I asked him, and in response he pointed to the closet. I picked him up and ran outside to the neighbor's house, pounding on the door screaming for help. An elderly woman answered, and she let me call the police with her phone. She was already clearly close with Sean, and because of that, she seemed a lot more comforting. Police showed up and said when they checked the upstairs closet, it was open, but no one was inside. The fact that it was open alone says everything. Someone was in Sean's closet that night. They must have made an escape when I took Sean and ran. The officers told me to stay at someone else's place for the night, and the elderly woman next door allowed us to sleep there. The next few nights after that, I watched Sean at my apartment. My sister and her husband cut the trip short, of course, after hearing the news. I was a 10-year-old diabetic who lived on the second-story floor. My parents lived on the first floor. That night, my dad was watching a scary movie about aliens. The aliens took over the world and were controlling people with their minds. I was unable to sleep in the room that I shared with my sister that night, so instead I slept on the first-story floor with my parents. At that time, my parents were using a baby monitor to make sure I didn't need any help in the middle of the night to take care of my diabetes. Late that night, as my parents and I fell asleep, I heard my mother's voice over the baby monitor. She said, "Amanda, honey, come give me a kiss. I'm going to work." In a confused daze, I looked outside to see it was pitch black. That's weird, I go to myself. Isn't it too late for my mom to be going to work? I rub the sleep out of my eyes as I make my way upstairs. The door to my sister's room cracks open, but my mom isn't in there. My sister is sound asleep on her bed, and the curtain just drifts open. I look around for my mom, but still can't find her. I make my way fast down the stairs and back into my parents' room, where my mom sat up and went, "What are you doing up?" I said, "Didn't you just ask me to come upstairs to give you a kiss goodbye?" She looks at me funny. "No, why would I say that?" she said. I looked at the baby monitor and said, "You didn't hear that?" She looked at me funny and says, "Go back to sleep." I lay on the floor shaking, thinking about what just happened. In my teens and early 20s, I would babysit as my side hustle. I was always really good with toddlers and babies, and usually the parents of the really young ones would pay more. There was this one pair of kids named Lucas and Adriana. Lucas was 2 and Adriana was 7, though Adriana doesn't have much to do with this story, I'll just say that right now. Lucas didn't really speak much, though I was told he had only just turned 2 a few weeks ago at the time. After a long and stressful day of watching the kids, they went to sleep. I would be spending the night at this couple's house watching their kids while they were out in some beach town with friends or something. When the kids finally went to sleep, I had some peace and quiet and time to unwind, as watching the two of them was a lot. I lay in the living room watching a movie. The couple actually still had a baby monitor for Lucas's room, and they asked me to keep that in earshot when he went to sleep. I left it on the coffee table in the living room. Eventually, I ended up on a FaceTime call with my friend, and that ate away so much time that by the end of it, it was past 12. I went to sleep after that. Actually, I fell asleep pretty easily. The next thing I remember was the dream. The freaky, disturbing, messed up dream. Everyone knows dreams can be weird and grainy, so I can't describe verbatim what happened in this dream. But the best I can remember, I somehow had lost the baby monitor and Lucas was missing. After searching through this weird dream version of the couple's house, I found the baby monitor under the bed, and on the screen was Lucas's dead body. And upon seeing that, a deep voice kept saying this was your fault. I must have heard it like 3 times before I suddenly woke up. After realizing it was just a dream, I remembered the baby monitor. I left it on the coffee table downstairs, but before going down to get it, I figured I'd check Lucas's room first since it was closer anyway, and I saw he was fast asleep. After that, I went downstairs to get the device and went back up to the room I was staying in. I went back to sleep, but once again, I woke up sometime later. But this time, I woke up to the little monitor device beeping and the red light flashing. I picked it up, and on the screen was Lucas standing up looking directly into the camera. Not smiling or laughing, just looking dead set into the camera, his eyes glowing in the night vision. The way he was looking freaked me out. It was a cause for concern, so I rushed over to his room. I got to his room. He was fast asleep, laying on his back. I said his name a few times and lightly shook him, but he didn't wake up. I looked around the room, scared, feeling like there was another presence in there with us. I checked the closet and looked under the crib. No one. I went back to the other bedroom and looked at the monitor again, and it showed Lucas laying flat in his crib. I turned it off for the night, but I didn't sleep as easily after that. To this day, I still don't understand that dream I had, or if it was some kind of warning, and I don't know what exactly I was seeing on that baby monitor screen. I just don't know what to believe was actually real.